Okay, what if I told you there's a framework, a tool that can completely change how you see, well, pretty much everything, from global politics to your own daily life? Let's dive right in. You ever just look at the news or even something happening at work and you just think to yourself, why? Why is this happening? Why do smart people or entire countries sometimes make choices that seem totally irrational or counterproductive or, let's be honest, just plain stupid? Well, believe it or not, there's a really powerful answer to that question. It's called game theory, and it's actually a surprisingly simple framework for making sense of our incredibly complex world. So, what is it really? At its heart, game theory is just the study of how and why people make decisions, especially when what you get depends on what someone else chooses to do. It's all about understanding the logic behind everyone's moves. And here's the really cool part. Any situation, and I mean any situation, can be broken down into just three basic components. First, you've got the players, right? The people involved. Second, the rules they have to play by, the limits. And third, the incentives. This is the big one. What do they want? How do they win? So the bottom line is this. If you can identify the players, understand the rules, and figure out what truly motivates them, their incentives, well, then you can understand how the entire game works. And that is where the real power is. Because once you really start to master this way of thinking, it comes with some serious payoffs. In fact, there are three huge promises that this framework can unlock for you. Let's start with the first promise, and it's maybe the most personal one. It's pretty simple, becoming a better version of yourself. And this is a pretty bold claim, right? The whole point of learning this isn't just about your career or getting good grades. It's something much, much deeper. It's the idea that you become a smarter and therefore a better person. So how on earth does that happen? Well, by learning to look at the world this way, you can't help but become more thoughtful. You start making smarter, more strategic decisions for yourself. It makes you more curious, and it can even make you more moral because you start to genuinely understand why other people are doing what they're doing. You even become more imaginative. Okay, so it improves you personally. That's huge. But what about that crazy, confusing world we talked about at the beginning? Well, that brings us to the second promise, using this framework to bring the entire world into focus. And let's just be real for a second, because I think we can all relate to this feeling. You'll finally be able to understand the world we live in, even when that world seems, well, kind of stupid. It's about making sense of what feels like total chaos. Game theory gives you this incredible lens to analyze why these things are happening. Now, look, this isn't about judging if something is right or wrong. We often know that in our gut. This is about understanding the players, the rules, and the incentives behind massive events like the war in Ukraine, the conflict between Israel and Iran, or the constant tension in the US-China relationship. You start to see the mechanics of the game being played out on a global stage. And understanding that game brings us to the third and honestly the most empowering promise of all. This is where you go from just being an observer to being a player and getting some control over your own future. Because here's the thing, and it sounds a little wild, but when you truly understand the components of any game, it almost feels like you get predictive powers. You can start to see the logical next moves before they even happen. And what's so incredible is how this applies everywhere. Yeah, on one hand, you can get a better sense of how big world events might unfold, but then you can turn that same powerful lens inward. You can analyze your own life's path and see how you, as a player in your own game, are likely to develop. So the ultimate payoff, it's not just about being smart or predicting things. It's about what those things give you. It's about getting control, sovereignty over your own destiny. And that's the real prize here. All right, now before we finish up, it's really important to put this all in perspective. This isn't some magic trick you learn in a few minutes. This is just the very beginning of a lifelong journey. The real work, it starts now. Learning to see the world this way, it's been called a lifelong struggle, but in the best possible way. It's a practice. It's about constantly sharpening your thinking, constantly analyzing the players, the rules, and the incentives in every new situation you come across. Which really just leaves us with one final thought. You have the basic framework now. Players, rules, and incentives. You've got the tools to understand the game, so the only question left is, how are you going to play it?